Greetings, greetings. So, trusting that everyone is doing well, and I just wanted to touch on some bullet points, right? In terms of folks educating themselves, and for folks to cultivate some discernment, especially young people and parents and people that are looking to be more well informed. So I'm just going to touch on some bullet points. The At this particular time, there's enough, or there's more than enough information, or a lot of information that has come forth for people to see. As I said a long time ago, this is not an entertainment channel. Fortunately, a lot of information has come to the forefront um, for us to see as a chocolate sun-kissed community, and also in the world community. Make no mistake, there are cults and manipulation at every level of society. So it's not that it's just relegated to the Black community, Afro American community. Um, as I mentioned before in other videos, and I invite people to educate themselves. There are so many cults on so many different levels of society, and it's at a fever pitch. And we are definitely at a time also where the popular culture worships cult personalities, whether they be so called spiritual, new age, celebrities. It sells things, it sells clothing. It's the easy way to manipulate people, and the the parallels and the patterns of cults. Many of them are pretty much on point and consistent. Although the outfits may change, the lingo may change, the profiles may change, whether the skin color, the locks, or if they look corporate, if they're professional, or if they have red, black, and green on. There are numerous cults at every level of society. Why? Because they produce a certain result. So there are patterns that people can peep for the purpose of cultivating discernment, the ability to see, and tell the difference of what's missing, or when things look the same, or when someone or a group or politician, whoever it may be, has really good gift of gab. How can we discern who it is we're listening to, and how can we identify their agenda? This is important for everyone, especially women. Whether you're single or whether you're a mom, it's very, very important so that we don't get manipulated. There are principles that are operating here, and it's not hard to manipulate people. So I really want to point out that there are parallels and there are patterns. If we step back objectively and remove the name, and if we put our personal preferences aside, it will be easier for us to shorten the learning curve and be more effective at seeing what are the patterns that allow people to be manipulated. And then also, I want to note that, again, at this time, with so much information that has come forth, there's so much opportunity to see. Um, Discernment is an opportunity for growth. So rather than merely be entertained and point the finger and look at those people over there, this is an opportunity for us to see where perhaps a lot of the activities we're seeing in cults and the manipulation is happening right around us, perhaps in our houses of worship, in our neighborhoods, our communities, and even within our families. Um, Again, it's not hard to manipulate people. And it's really important for people to learn, especially young people or anyone, before you get damaged or scammed out of your money or expose yourself to something that you can't get out of, or you get stuck in a situation. And then you're isolated and it's hard to get out of. And sometimes you may not be able to recoup to get back a lot of what you put in. If anything, you may get some life lessons, but quite often you can come out with some emotional, mental damage. But you can take and leverage that by becoming a sharper thinker, a critical thinker, cultivating your discernment, how to tell who and what you're speaking to at any particular time, and what folks' agendas are. An agenda does not necessarily have to be negative, but quite often we're in a time where truth and principles are being manipulated. So I just wanted to point that out. In addition, I also want to say I think it's important to note something else that is manipulated quite often is the concept of forgiveness. It's quite often a concept that's used with religion to make people either be okay with being in a subservient position, to be okay with poverty, being exploited, being misused and abused. So I think it's really, it can be very beneficial to us to understand how folks manipulate the definitions of words when it's convenient to make us feel okay with being abused or getting got, basically. So it is up to us, it's our responsibility to reframe and rewrite the narrative, again, to be discerning and understand what context people are using forgiveness in. For example, at this point, I can really peep. To me, I think forgiveness is a crock of crap. Now, to remember what something that has happened and not loop it over and over and over and just focus on the trauma and the negativity, but perhaps to understand choices and to be responsible and to release the trauma and to put it in perspective makes all the sense in the world. So it'll be up to us to take all these trigger words and reframe them so they can benefit us in our decision making, so that we can learn and apply in a very tangible way and not just continually get off on wordplay and making ourselves feel better, but still making some of the same decisions. So forgiveness in the context of remember, release, and put into perspective so that we can continue and grow and benefit, with better sight, that's beneficial. But just forgiving on just an emotional level, it actually doesn't even really make any sense. It's like reverse guilt. So I would really encourage folks to be careful, right? Bullet point, be careful who you go to for help. Be careful who you go to for help. Just because someone has a gift of gab and they're poetic and they can make you feel a certain way and maybe tap into certain insecurities or traumas that you have had in the past and they seem like a father figure, quite often we can be vulnerable. All people, males and females, have different vulnerabilities because human beings go through different types of traumas. But be very careful of who you go to for help. And I invite you not to be afraid to ask questions or to vet, to take your time, even if you like someone and they appeal to you, but to take your time and vet everyone. It is not a negative thing to vet someone because they are an elder of a certain age or because their skin tone looks like you. It could even be a quote unquote therapist. It's healthy to qualify people that you go to for advice and what's in it for them. It's not a bad thing to pay sometimes for objective advice and to have healthy boundaries, even with people that you may go to for counsel and advice. And maybe, not maybe, it would benefit us to take our time and to qualify who you go to for advice. If you were to go to a surgeon, you would vet that person. If you were to go to a lawyer to represent you, you would vet that person. And by vetting, for young people out there, that means to qualify. How are you qualifying this person to give you advice? For example, you may not be aware of, let's say, if you're going to um, a therapist, their personal relationships could be in shambles and you wouldn't know because they have a degree. At the same time, um, what is the advice or this particular skill set that you are going to somebody for? So we got to take our time to be critical thinkers. And ultimately, the responsibility is going to be on us. Whoever we go to for help, who we choose to go to for help. And it's really high time that we have the opportunity Can't tell grown folks what to do, to look inside of ourselves and really step up a level of personal responsibility and accountability. That may seem harder. Sometimes people may not know what to do, but quite often, we can underestimate doing research, doing the uncomfortable things, just like a workout. We may want somebody to give us a meal plan and tell us exactly what to do. And quite often, we know a lot of what to do, and quite often, we're not addressing what we shouldn't be doing, what we should be leaving out, right? People want to do the pretty stuff, but a lot of transformation, the grunt work is often not popular. It may seem like it's boring, saving, not giving into vices, cultivating strength and focus. That stuff is usually boring. But shortcutting that and hoping that someone will give us the secret formula is quite often, how we get played. Basically, do know that there are certain things that are going to be exploited by manipulators or cults. And again, these are principles that can be applied in life, especially if there are any young people out there. These are some things, even if you don't fully know how to articulate it, these are some things for you to consider, right? Things that will be exploited. When I say exploited, they can be things that can be used to manipulate you. Vices or habits that you may have. That could be habits of overindulging in any kind of appetites of food, um, shopping, mismanagement, which is closely related to responsibility. Um, any kind of vices you have for your consumption, TV, porn, just wasting your time. Any kind of vices that you have will be exploited. Traumas, if you've gone through things that are very traumatic, your traumas will be exploited. Um, if you have fears, if you have confusion around making decisions, if you're very idealistic, right? I know definitely women can have a tendency to be idealistic. It makes sense that people want to be idealistic because you want to have hope about something. But being very idealistic will quite often get you exploited, not just by cults, by religions. We open up, you know, um, our pocketbooks, and our psyche to people because we want to be so idealistic. And quite often, even by being idealistic, can be a form of escapism, right? I'm not saying don't have high ideals and aspirations, but while we're here on this earth plane, um, there are responsibilities and there are very uncomfortable things in life that we have to deal with. Money, illness, health. Those are things that must be cultivated. We have to put work in, and there aren't really any shortcuts. Your inexperience, your lack of experience is something huge that will be exploited. This will be in relationships. If you're inexperienced, somebody that's much more experienced, or 20, 30, 40 years older, they're very aware that you're unexperienced. And quite often, for example, some young women may think that, and it could be that some more mature women are just jaded or angry, but quite often they may not have the life experience or the vision or the foresight. It may not even be on their radar with somebody more mature. This could be with men too. They may not have the vision or the experience or the eyes for what somebody is saying to them, and quite often it can be very, very late in the game until they realize, wow, this is what that person was talking about. Like, for example, you can't see the patterns if somebody is not taking responsibility in their life. Quite often like to say, if they're not being responsible with when it comes to their genitals, having children, if they don't have high esteem and protecting themselves from diseases, or if they're just very generally irresponsible, that is a red flag. So if you have a lack of experience, you quite often be impressed with very, very little. If a young person comes from a background where they're economically challenged, and somebody offers them a flashy cell phone, or if somebody, and this is a huge one, if folks feel so down and depressed and are struggling economically, and someone paints a picture of a tropical paradise where you don't have to work, and you can be easily manipulated and you cannot see behind the scenes. So your lack of experience and discerning eye can and most likely will be exploited. Low esteem, if you have low esteem, which usually results from trauma, can quite often be a result of being mishandled sexually. This can be male and female when you're younger. That low esteem and also shame, your shame and low esteem, do know that it can and will be exploited. So, what are some of the things that you can do? On the internet, there's so much information. There's a lot of entertainment, but also there's some basic information. It's not saying you need to spend all day on the internet, but there are things that you can research: narcissism, cults. You can research um, eating healthy, exercise, things to release stress. Something really important that you can at least you have access to is to get a comprehensive, at least a working knowledge of psychology and why people do the things that they do. So, this can be useful for young people, or even adults who have grown up in homes with parents that may have been alcoholics or drug addicts or whatever economic demographic you're from. Parents that gambled or were abusive or verbally abusive. So, to put into a perspective, to understand why people do the things that they do, and also what are some ways that we can develop communication skills. You can research like what to do with people that trigger you. You know, these are things that cause us a lot of stress, and many of us that are surrounded by a lot of dysfunction, almost like just very negative communication. These are some of the things that people are looking to escape in these cults. They just want it to end. If you grow up in a dysfunctional family, you have dysfunctional jobs that you hate, you don't see any kind of way out, you're overwhelmed in terms of finances, and people just want to escape and want a quick fix. But you can educate yourself. There's some really great channels for mental health. These are some of the things that we don't discuss in our communities. It's not about going out and lynching anyone, but if you have shame around things that have happened to you sexually, if you have shame around being abused, there may be some people that have participated in abusing other people. So, what are the options for them? That can be many men. What are the options that they have? What is the safe space for them to go and get help and talk about their anger or their frustration with trying to survive, economically. This is often for a lot of, a lot of our men, and so they become very angry, and it manifests in another kind of way for women. But that being said, there is information available now. We can educate ourselves about mental health and what options are. And in many ways, it may seem like it's not a person, but you have you have endless resources available to you if you're looking at this computer that you can research on the internet instead of us just watching, Wendy Williams or laughing at all this cult activity. We can educate ourselves. And perhaps if you have any young people around you or your circle of influence, the 5 people you spend the most time with, perhaps a question for us to ask ourselves: is mental health a priority? Is that something that we discuss within our circle of influence, the 5 people we spend the most time with? And if there are any young people around us, is that something that is a priority? Also, is health and fitness. These are things that don't have to cost a lot of money, going out and walking and doing other things. So those things may seem simple and boring, but they are tremendous, because sometimes people are running to cults to run away from something, and quite often not giving credence. We're really not taking advantage of a lot of resources and opportunities that are around us. For example, because we're so looping old trauma, a lot of in the states are not taking advantage of Wi-Fi, museums, parks. These are all things that we can use to make ourselves feel better and soothe ourselves, instead of just going to people that haven't been vetted properly. You don't even know what their own situation is, or their behavioral history, and we're going to them for help because we like their outfit or their gift of gab. So, some other just bullet points is it's beneficial for folks to know the legal names. This may seem overly simple of people that you are dealing with, the legal names. We get so impressed by these lofty sounding names. Yes, I like cultural names too, and I'm big on words and the power of mantras. But when it comes to accountability and responsibility, we're so caught up in these new age myths, or creating myths for ourselves and stories and cultural stories to make us feel better, that it doesn't occur to people that should something not go a certain way, even in your relationships, it's very important to have accountability. Can you hold somebody legally and financially accountable? And if you don't even know their real name, it's like, what are we doing? So we're getting so caught up in, we think we've traded off a lot of religion, but it's just transferred over. And the culture now is being treated as a religion and as a form of escapism where we're not dealing responsibly. Anybody that we're dealing with, if we're having interactions, how can you hold them accountable if you don't know their legal name? So as much as people want to down the Western system, just common sense, if we take away the labels, it is important to have accountability legally and financially, and at times physical when you are being violated physically, when you have to deal with financial transactions every day in life and economic transactions, and legally, if we don't have an established system, then we have to use it. Well, it's an opportunity for us to use the system. We all live underneath a system of rules and regulations. And it is a process for us to create that if we want another standard. The reality is many of us are not committed um, to creating a standard of accountability within our own community. So we can't really proceed in doing transactions and business and the stuff of life without accountability and being able to hold people responsible in a very tangible way. So that comes back to legal names. Know the legal names of who you're dealing with. That should be a red flag for you as an individual. Wait a minute. Oh, I'm so caught up in this person's personality. It sounds so wonderful. I didn't even get their legal name. I don't even know their legal name. So it becomes this religious fervor, and excitement all over again. And it is a really potent distraction. Ultimately, the folks that are scam artists will find ways to hold you accountable, but quite often we're being so romantic and the program of this person is so lofty, or what we're looking up to is so lofty, we don't hold uh, religious leaders, gurus, cults, all the stuff accountable. And it really is a deterrent from us growing, because there's no check and there's no balance. So I don't have all the answers, but what I can tell you, it is a critical bullet point to know the legal names of who you're dealing with. And if someone doesn't want to tell you their legal name, then that's a red flag. Use whatever name, but when you're doing any kind of transactions, you need to hold somebody accountable. Y'all creating children together. Life moves forward with agreements, clear agreements, contracts. You have to have someone you can hold each other accountable. And I would be very wary of anyone that discourages you because it's not cultural or it's not spiritual, not to hold folks accountable. So these do understand that there are basic truths and principles of life that are being manipulated. And as I've shared before, and as people should be able to see by now, there are basic truths and that are being manipulated to the point where people are so caught up in their mind. People are not on this side, right? Whereas, it's almost like people can talk you out of you're in pain, which I've seen an example of. The person is in searing pain and somebody does some whatever and put their hand on them, laying on of hands. And, sometimes the placebo effect psychologically can help make you feel better, but people are just blatantly ignoring things because we're in such a mind screw, allowing ourselves to be manipulated, and also pretending to not see what we see and pretending to not know what we know. And it's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. So your emotions and your traumas, I think those are something else that I touched on. Those are things that will be manipulated. I perhaps our folks' best bet is to, even if it seems you're going slow, is to do your own internal work. And what I mean by that is take your time, educate yourself on your mental health, your physical health. Again, a good example is we don't need anyone at this age and stage to tell us to, we don't need to join a cult for somebody to tell us to eat fruits and vegetables. We don't need to join a cult to be responsible, as a parent, to parent. We don't need a cult for some of these basic things. We don't need a cult to educate us on consciousness or being responsible. These are things that are inherent common sense, but we're so in love with being in love. We're so in love with the idea of religion or spirituality that we've just opened ourselves to just any old thing. And my grandpa, he used to have a saying. He said, "You're so smart, you're stupid." I used to wonder why he used to say these sayings. But folks now are so engaged in rhetoric and semantics. And another distinction is that a manipulator is going to change the meaning of the words every time when it's convenient. And if you don't have enough esteem to be able to discern that although the person is saying love or they're saying spirituality or they're saying marriage, if you can't discern the behavior, you're going to get got. You're going to get taken. So I'm just really encouraging people that all that has come out by now, the patterns are there for people to see. People are still going to choose to go to cults. And there are lessons for people to learn. But at this particular point, the information is there. Just as well, just like, with our communities, we can point the finger outward, but there's so much now that has come to the surface that was always there for us to address internally. If we're being irresponsible with our money, our time, finances, if we're being sexually irresponsible, whatever labels you want to call it, then we are going to reap the consequences. And if you're a young person, just because of your age is not going to protect you from the consequences. If you're a nice person and you're ignorant, that is not going to take away the consequences of your decisions. And so it's very easy. It's easy. I would even say habitual for us um, to romanticize our culture. I think most people do it with politicians or whoever we favor, our favorite preferences. But it's easy for us to pretend that there is not deviancy in our community. All human beings have the capacity to be deviant, whatever label you want to put on yourself, whether you eat meat or raw fruits and vegetables, whatever religious tag you want to put on yourself, whatever sexual tag you want to put on yourself. Most of the children in these churches were not the people that violated them. They didn't call themselves, they were labeled as quote unquote hetero. So, but that doesn't mean you can't be deviant. Human beings have the capacity for deviancy. Women don't need to pretend that doesn't exist. Men don't need to pretend that just because somebody has a beautiful face and a lot of makeup on, that we don't have the capacity for deviancy. And this is the opportunity for us to be discerning and to mature up. Hopefully that's what we can learn from all this stuff so that we can move on. In one sense, I could say that I would say that it's boring, but it's not so much that it's boring. It's like at some point, there's so much information that to be had now that has come forth for us to see and discern. So it's not about one particular individual, one particular cult, because I can tell you part of the draw to watch all this different cult activity is that many of us, if we had to really admit it, can see this stuff playing out in our personal lives or in our community. It's not just these cults that we're seeing here as well. If we're honest, a lot of these young people are have experienced a lot of dysfunction that they're running away from, a lot of shame they're running away from, and don't have a lot of support. Many adults are depressed, in their lives, facing a lot of stress, and are looking for an escape. But a lot of times we don't realize you're going to get, when you, like I said, be careful you go to for help, because you are likely going to get more than you could have ever bargained for. Because in the anxiety to get help, you don't realize the agenda of the person you're going to for help. Your personal agenda may be to get an easier life, or again, your ideals or this fantasy that you have. But you're most likely going to get more than you bargained for. You might even get what you were looking for, but it may not be the full context. You most likely did not see, and this is where the lack of experience comes in. You may likely not have an experience with a cult, and there's a distinction between cults and religions. For example, a lot of the religions in the States, you can get up from a church and you can go home, but many people are isolated within a cult. And after they have been engaged in a certain kind of way, if they're isolated and they're being inundated with programs over and over and over again, it's a little bit different. It's a little intense. Many people may not have a frame of reference for the intensity of that, and just the level we may take for granted, the level of shame and insecurity and trauma that people are coming with, especially young people, adults as well, but I would say especially young people. So if we're honest, a lot of these young people have been traumatized and been exposed to just too much. So there's so much opportunity for us to discern and look at what kinds of stuff, what kind of environment are we also supporting as a community. So there are many things that the quote unquote cult leader is saying that are universal truths when it comes to, health. I guess health is a big one. And these idealisms around pooling economics, but again, with no checks and balances and no way to hold people accountable, with many are lured into something idealistic. And you need some kind of system of accountability. So just wanted to touch on those things very quickly. By now, people should be able to see some distinct patterns. And rather than pointing the finger, is there any way when we look online at these different cults, are there any lessons for us to learn? I know I got some huge, huge lessons. Be careful who you're going to for help. It may seem like it's a slower process, but do your own work. I know there are numerous videos where I've told people you can go to the tropics, you can do all this different stuff, but there's no fantasies. And also people don't know what's going on in somebody else's house, and they don't know what's going on in other parts of the world. There are trade-offs for wherever you go. So, all that glitters is not gold. And there is gold in our lives. A lot of times we're taking for granted the different types of love relationships that we have. Although they may not be perfect, we have a lot of opportunity for fulfillment, for resources. There are skills that are not that are left untapped. Educating yourself wherever you are may be a slower process, but you can really learn what you want to learn and what you apply yourself to. So again, like I said, your fears will be exploited, and people will sell you a quick way to get out of something. But the use of technology, you have so much information at your fingertips. It's for us to take 110% responsibility for our health and not to joke around with it. I know for many of us, it's a joke. These are things, that a cult leader is going to take advantage of. Some simple stuff like, because we won't address our health. You don't necessarily have to call yourself a vegan, because that doesn't necessarily mean that you have morals. It doesn't mean necessarily you're not a junk food vegan, but regardless of the label Are you taking care and prioritizing your health? Are you prioritizing your sexual health? Are you prioritizing responsibility? Are you being responsible with the money that you have? Do you feel confident in your own hair and your skin? If not, your insecurities and your fears will be exploited. So hopefully somebody finds some value out of this video. Please, I invite you to educate yourself on cults. There's an extensive list of videos on this channel so people can get some objective education on cults, black and white, so you can see the patterns, hear from people who were in cults, many for years, some that escaped, some whose parents were cult leaders. And I invite us not to, just to be very balanced. Yes, I have, and let me be clear, I have deep respect. It's only common sense to have respect for the elderly. But let's not forget, let's not be so idealistic. This is one of the reasons why a lot of gurus and pimp predators and stuff go unchecked, or even family members, because we're being so idealistic. Human beings have the capacity to be deviant. So your protection, I would say, as a young woman, is to use your common sense. Do not pretend to not see what it is that you're seeing, or pretending, what is it that you're pretending not to know. If you go to these people for help and you put your responsibility for your decision making into somebody else's hands, you're going to get so much more than bargained for. You're going to get so much more than bargained for. There are women that will turn a blind eye to a lot, because folks are traumatized and looking for, not to underestimate, looking for attention and validation. These are things for us to understand. Men look for validation, or in a whole nother way, from a father figure. I've mentioned before, many young men, can be exploited by a coach. This happens, all the time. They're looking for a father figure, and that is not wrong. Fruits and vegetables is not wrong. Raw foods that you're eating is not wrong. It's obviously, that's very beneficial. But when somebody's using that to control you, or to guilt, or to shame you into being into a cult, or to not use your common sense, and constantly rationalizing and making excuses for behaviors that are obviously off, that is, that's a problem. That's a problem. We're so often trying to struggle for the right words that we can talk ourselves out of our common sense, and people can talk us out of our common sense. So I invite you to educate, take the time, invest in yourself, Investing in yourself will increase your esteem. Invest in yourself, invest in your health. Women, take care of your bodies. It can't be underestimated. It's not just to lead with your sexuality, but so you can have a healthy esteem. Granny, have you ever heard of a guy named Osho? He's dead now, but his cult. Very well aware of Osho. Look through the playlist. I've heard of Osho. And so, again, a great example with a lot of the East Indian tradition, a lot of which I'm familiar with. I love yoga. I love movement. I've been to different ashrams. But at this point in my life, I can see so many different parallels. So I can be discerning, and I can enjoy movement and yoga. But I'm also, at one time, I didn't know about the Dalits, in India. And just like there's so many churches, several churches on every other block in Harlem, ashrams are like a dime for 3 dozen in India. So again, people are looking for an escapism, and some people have the money, to pay for it. So all is to say is, like, not to delude ourselves. If we are the ones that are looking for someone, if you're looking for someone looking outside yourself, you will likely get played and be exploited. And we can point the finger at the cult, but even if we look at the Hitlers, he was vegetarian. There was this guy, Alex Crowley, whatever his name is. You've got a lot of people with deviant behaviors that were vegetarian. They're going to look to enhance their health and their brain power too. So just so we don't get lost in a sea of information, just your common sense is there. Have faith. You have common sense that is there. But also, if you can take the time, to discern. For example, Do we really need to sit and meditate and chant all day? I've gone to ashrams and chant, but is that really practical? Like, why is there a need? Why are we trying to escape? Do we need to meditate all day? As someone that's worked in the fitness industry, you can take fitness and something that's healthy and turn it into something negative. I've seen people working out, um, and it's one thing if you're an athlete, but if you're using it as a form of escape, you can take anything that's positive, and your ego, I like to say the ego will take out the host. You can twist anything, you can change the context of any kind of word, with the behavior. So that's where the discernment is going to come in. Educate yourself, use your common sense. Responsibility is spiritual. That's spirituality because it's rooted, it has actions attached to it. Common sense is spiritual, right? Quite often, and these con artists will talk you out of your common sense. And it plays on your fears, your doubts, your insecurities, your guilt, and your shame. So if you don't address those things, if you got to exercise it out, journal it out, trust your own process, educate yourself. Please, I invite you to educate yourself. And with that, create a great day for yourself on purpose.